The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by any living species. It floated in orbit around the neutral world of Vereth Prime, a massive ring of glass and alien metal that held representatives from over 400 known civilizations. Some of these species had traveled the stars for millions of years. Some had built empires that stretched across entire arms of the galaxy. And all of them had gathered here today because a minor species called the Zarathi had requested an emergency session. Nobody took the Zarathi very seriously. They were a predatory race with hard black shells covering their bodies, sharp claws, and a taste for war. They had conquered a handful of small systems over the past few centuries, bullying weaker neighbors and making noise at council meetings. But in the grand order of things, they were nothing special. The galaxy was full of species like them, loud, aggressive, and ultimately forgettable. So when Commander Vrethkalor of the Zarathi Dominion marched into the Grand Chamber, his black armor polished to a mirror shine, most of the delegates barely looked up. A few of the older representatives sighed quietly. Another Zarathi boast, they assumed, another demand for recognition that nobody would grant. Vrethkalor stood at the center of the speaking platform and waited for silence. He was tall for his kind, nearly 8 feet, and his 4 eyes burned with a pride that he could barely contain. Behind him, a massive holographic display flickered to life, showing star maps, fleet formations, and a small blue planet spinning slowly in the dark. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice echoing through the chamber, "I come before you today not with a request, but with a declaration. The Zarathi Dominion has expanded its territory. We have successfully invaded and conquered a previously uncontacted world in the outer spiral arm of the galaxy." He paused for effect. A few delegates shifted in their seats. Conquering uncontacted worlds was frowned upon, but not unheard of. The Council had rules about it, but enforcement was loose, and minor species broke those rules all the time. Vrethkalor touched a control on his wrist, and the holographic display zoomed in on the blue planet. Oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling over its surface. It was, by any standard, a beautiful world. "The natives called it Earth," he said. "They called themselves humans. They were a primitive species, confined to their own planet, fighting among themselves, completely unaware of the wider galaxy." He clicked again, and the display showed footage of the invasion. Zarathi warships descending through thick clouds, explosions blooming across cities made of glass and steel, human military vehicles, crude things that rolled on wheels and flew on simple engines, being torn apart by Zarathi weapons. "Their resistance was brave but hopeless," Vrethkalor continued, unable to keep the satisfaction out of his voice. "Their largest governments surrendered within weeks. Their military forces were destroyed. Earth now belongs to the Zarathi Dominion, and I formally request that the Council recognize our territorial claim over the Sol system." He stood tall, chest out, waiting for the applause, waiting for the envy, waiting for the respect he had always craved from these ancient, arrogant species who had looked down on his people for so long. But the applause did not come. Instead, there was silence, a deep, heavy silence that pressed down on the chamber like a physical weight, the kind of silence that comes not from indifference, but from shock. Vrethkalor blinked his 4 eyes. The delegates were not bored. They were not dismissive. They were staring at him. Hundreds of alien faces, hundreds of different species, and every single one of them wore the same expression: fear. The Velori delegate, a tall and graceful being with silver skin and eyes like liquid gold, had gone completely still. The Krithon, a massive creature that resembled a mountain of living stone, was trembling, actually trembling. The Dolmakri, who were known across the galaxy for their absolute calm in every situation, had risen from their seats and were backing toward the exits. High Arbiter Selena sat at the highest point of the chamber, looking down at Vrethkalor with an expression he could not read. She was Valori, old beyond measure, and she had led the council for longer than the Zarathi had been a spacefaring species. Her silver face was like a mask carved from ice. The chamber held its breath. "You invaded Earth?" she said. Vrethkalor hesitated. The way she said it, not as a question of fact, but as a question of sanity, made something cold twist in his stomach. But he pushed the feeling aside. He was a conqueror. He would not be made to feel small. "Yes," he said firmly. "We invaded Earth. We conquered it. The humans are under our control." Selena stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the other elder delegates. The Valori ambassador closed his eyes. The Krithvan delegate made a low sound like grinding boulders, their species' expression of deep grief. An ancient Dolmakri diplomat simply shook her head over and over, as if trying to deny what she had just heard. Then the chamber exploded, not with applause or anger, but with pure, uncontrolled panic. Delegates shouted over each other. Some demanded details. Some demanded proof. Some were already calling their homeworlds on emergency channels. The Pelori delegate, a small, nervous creature covered in blue feathers, fainted and had to be carried out by its aides. Vrethkalor stood at the center of it all, completely lost. This was not the reaction he had expected, not even close. He had prepared for jealousy, for political maneuvering, for grudging respect. He had not prepared for this. He had not prepared for an entire galactic government to look at him like he had just set fire to the universe. "Silence!" Selena's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The chamber fell quiet instantly. Even the ones who had been shouting stopped mid-word. When the High Arbiter spoke in that tone, you listened. It was not a suggestion. She pressed a control on her chair, and heavy blast doors began to seal every exit in the chamber. The locks engaged with deep, final thuds that echoed through the sudden stillness. "No one leaves," Solena said quietly. "No one sends a message. No one breathes a word of this until I am finished." She turned her golden eyes back to Vrethkalor, and for the first time in his life, the Zarathi commander saw something in the eyes of an elder species that was directed at him. Not contempt, not amusement, not dismissal. Pity. "Sit down, Commander," Solena said, her voice heavy with something ancient and tired. "You have made the greatest mistake in the history of this council, and before this day is over, you will understand exactly what you have done." She paused, and the weight of 10,000 years of galactic history pressed down on every soul in that room. "You have no idea," she whispered, "what you have just awakened." The blast doors were sealed. The chamber was locked. 400 species sat in nervous silence as High Arbiter Solena rose slowly from her seat and descended the long steps to the central platform. Her silver robes trailed behind her like liquid metal, and her golden eyes held a weight that made even the oldest delegates look away. Vrethkalor still stood at the center, confused and angry. He had come here as a conqueror, and they were treating him like a criminal. His claws tightened at his sides. "With respect, High Arbiter," he said, forcing calm into his voice, "I do not understand this reaction. We conquered a primitive species on an uncontacted world. This is not unusual. The Krithvan did the same thing 3 centuries ago. The Pelori conquered a world of herbivores who had not yet invented fire," Solena interrupted, her voice flat. "You invaded Earth." She said the word like it was a curse, like it tasted of poison. Solena reached the platform and touched a hidden control. The holographic display above them flickered and changed. The Zarathi invasion footage disappeared, replaced by a simple file marker, a red symbol that pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. Around its border, in the oldest known galactic script, were 2 words that made several delegates gasp. Classification Omega. It was the highest secrecy level the Council possessed. In the entire history of galactic civilization, fewer than a dozen files had ever received this classification. Wars had been fought over less. Species had been destroyed over less. And now Solana was opening one in front of 400 delegates. The file label read SOL3/Terra/Do Not Engage. What you are about to see, Solana said, has been restricted for longer than most of your species have existed. I am breaking that restriction now, because the damage has already been done, and you all deserve to understand what is coming. She activated the file. The display filled with data, ancient data, recorded by the first Concord, a civilization so old that it had risen and fallen before most current species had crawled out of their oceans. The first Concord had been the first great galactic power. They had mapped the galaxy, catalogued millions of worlds, and established the very foundations upon which the current council was built. And one of the worlds they had found was a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star in the outer spiral arm. Earth. The first Concord discovered Sol 3 approximately 12,000 of the humans years ago, Solana explained. At that time, the dominant species, humans, were primitive. They had no metal, no cities, no writing. They lived in small groups and hunted animals with sharpened stones and wooden spears. And they terrified the first Concord. A murmur ran through the chamber. The first Concord had been the most powerful civilization in galactic history. What could a species of Stone Age hunters possibly do to frighten them? Solana changed the display. Biological data appeared. Detailed scans of human bodies, their muscles, their bones, their strange and terrifying biology. Humans are persistence predators, she said. Most predatory species hunt through speed, or ambush, or venom, or overwhelming force. Humans do none of these things. Instead, they chase their prey, they follow it, they track it across distances that would kill most species. They do not stop, they do not tire. They chase an animal for hours, sometimes days, until it simply collapses from exhaustion, and then they kill it. The chamber was very quiet. They are also the most adaptable biological organisms ever recorded. They survive in frozen wastelands, in burning deserts, in thick jungles, underwater, and at extreme altitudes. They eat almost anything. They heal from injuries that would kill most species. They can function with missing limbs, damaged organs, and broken bones. They have been recorded continuing to fight after receiving wounds that should have rendered them unconscious. She let that sink in for a moment, then changed the display again. This time, it showed a timeline, a simple graph tracking human technological development over the past 10,000 years. The graph looked like a wall, almost flat for thousands of years, then shooting straight up like a vertical line. This is what truly frightened the first Concord, Solana said softly. The speed of their advancement. In less than 10,000 years, a blink of an eye by galactic standards, humans went from stone tools to splitting the atom. They discovered nuclear energy and immediately turned it into a weapon. They detonated these weapons on their own planet, on their own cities, on their own people. She looked around the chamber, and they survived. Not only survived, they thrived. Their population grew. Their technology accelerated even faster. Vreth Kalor shifted on his feet. Impressive for a primitive species, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. But we defeated them. Their weapons were nothing compared to... They reached space, Solana cut him off, by strapping themselves to metal tubes filled with explosive fuel and lighting it on fire. They did this knowing that the slightest error would kill them. They did it anyway. They walked on their own moon, less than 70 years after they first learned to fly. She turned to face him directly. Commander, your species took 11,000 years to go from atmospheric flight to lunar landing. Humans did it in less than 70. The number hit the chamber like a physical blow. Delegates exchanged horrified glances. Some began doing their own calculations, and the results made them sick. Selena continued. The first Concord placed Sol 3 under permanent quarantine, not to protect the humans from the galaxy, Commander, to protect the galaxy from the humans. Monitoring satellites were placed around their system. Every few centuries, the data was reviewed. She pulled up a series of reports, each one marked with increasingly urgent warnings. Every review was more alarming than the last. They built a global communication network that connects nearly every human on their planet, billions of them, in real time. They created artificial minds. They mapped their own genetic code and began modifying it. They did all of this while constantly fighting wars among themselves. They never stopped fighting. They never stopped building. They never stopped adapting. She closed the file and looked at Rethkalor. The pity in her eyes had deepened into something close to sorrow. The standing order regarding Sol 3 has been the same for 10,000 years. Do not contact them. Do not provoke them. Do not, under any circumstances, give them a reason to look up at the stars and see an enemy. Because the one thing every analysis has agreed on, across 10,000 years of observation, is this. She stepped closer to the Zarathi commander, close enough that he could see the ancient weariness in her golden eyes. If humanity ever unites against a common enemy, nothing in this galaxy will stop them. Nothing. Not the Krithvan, not the Vylori, not the Council itself. The only thing keeping them contained was their own ignorance. They did not know we were here. They did not know the stars held enemies. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. And you just told them. A technician near the back of the chamber suddenly stood up, her face pale. High Arbiter, she called out, her voice shaking. The monitoring satellites around Sol, they are going offline. Every head in the chamber turned. One by one, the technician continued, staring at her display with wide eyes. Someone is shutting them down. From the surface. Selena closed her eyes. They found them, she said quietly. Of course they found them. Vrethgalor opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time since he had entered this chamber, the pride was gone from his eyes. In its place was something he had never felt before. The cold, creeping beginning of real fear. The last satellite went dark, and somewhere on a small blue planet in the outer spiral arm, 8 billion humans looked up at the sky and finally understood that they were not alone. They were not afraid. They were furious. 6 months had passed since the Zarathi came to Earth, and Commander Vrethkalor could not sleep. It was not a problem his species usually had. The Zarathi were conquerors. They had taken worlds before. Small, quiet worlds with small, quiet species that accepted their defeat and fell in line. That was how conquest worked. You broke the enemy's military, you occupied their cities, you installed your authority, and the conquered species submitted. It was simple. It was clean. It was the natural order. Earth was not clean. Earth was not simple. And the humans absolutely refused to submit. On paper, the occupation was a success. The major human governments had surrendered. Their military bases were ruins. Zarathi garrisons held every large city on the planet. The Zarathi flag flew over Washington, Beijing, Moscow, London, and 100 other capitals. Every metric said that Earth was conquered. But the metrics were lying. Supplies disappeared from locked Zarathi warehouses. Food, weapons, fuel, vanishing without a trace. Security recordings showed nothing. The locks were untouched. The guards had seen nothing. But the supplies were gone. It happened once, then twice, then every week, then every day. Then the patrols started disappearing. A squad of 12 Zarathi soldiers would leave a garrison on a routine sweep and simply never return. No distress calls, no weapons fire, no bodies. They were just gone. One day, Vreth sent out 40 patrols across the European continent. 11 did not come back. He sent search teams after them. 2 of those did not come back either. The communication relays were next. The Zorathi had set up a network of signal towers to coordinate their forces across the planet. One morning, every relay on the African continent switched off simultaneously. When technicians went to repair them, they found that the relays had not been destroyed. They had been reprogrammed. Instead of Zorathi military channels, they were broadcasting human music, news reports in dozens of human languages, and strange images that the Zorathi could not understand. Pictures with text on them that the humans apparently found amusing. The technicians tried to fix the relays, and found that the humans had rewritten the base code so thoroughly that it was easier to replace them entirely. They replaced them. 3 days later, it happened again. Colonel Marin Driscoll sat in a bunker 50 meters beneath a mountain in the Swiss Alps and watched the chaos unfold on stolen Zorathi displays. She was a small woman with short gray hair, steady hands, and eyes that had seen too much death to be afraid of anything anymore. Before the invasion, she had been a career officer in the United States Army. Now she was something else entirely, the closest thing humanity had to a unified resistance leader. She did not command through rank or authority. The old chains of command were gone. Instead, she coordinated. She connected. In the 6 months since the invasion, she had built a network of resistance cells that spanned the entire planet. Fighters in Lagos, hackers in Seoul, engineers in Mumbai, chemists in Sao Paulo, tacticians in Berlin. They communicated through methods the Zorathi could not intercept, because the methods were so primitive that alien technology did not even recognize them as communication. Handwritten notes, carrier pigeons, children passing coded messages in schoolyard games. But the real weapon was not the resistance network. The real weapon was what the humans were doing in the hidden laboratories, the basement workshops, the university buildings that the Zorathi thought were empty. They were learning. From the very first day of the occupation, humans had been collecting Zorathi technology. Every broken weapon, every crashed vehicle, every discarded piece of equipment. They took it apart. They studied it. They figured out how it worked. And then they made it better. In a laboratory hidden beneath a hospital in Tokyo, a team of physicists cracked Zorathi energy cell technology and began building human versions that were smaller, lighter, and more powerful than the originals. In a factory basement in Detroit, engineers used the principles of Zorathi metallurgy to create a new alloy that was stronger than anything either species had ever produced. In a garage in Bangalore, a 19-year-old engineering student reverse-engineered a Zorathi gravity drive, using parts from motorcycles and washing machines. And in a tiny apartment in Seoul, a 16-year-old girl named Park Ji-yeon used a modified gaming console to hack into the Zorathi orbital command frequency. She did not just listen. She took control. For 17 minutes, she had full access to every Zorathi ship in orbit. She used those 17 minutes to download their entire tactical database before they detected her and cut the connection. When the database was decrypted and distributed to resistance cells around the world, it changed everything. Suddenly, the humans had the blueprints for Zorathi ships, the specifications of their weapons, the positions of every garrison on the planet, and most importantly, the coordinates of the Zorathi homeworld. Vreth learned about the database theft 3 days after it happened. He stood in his command center in what had once been the United Nations building in New York, and stared at the report. And for the first time, he felt something crack inside him. Not his confidence, something deeper. His understanding of what kind of enemy he was facing. His soldiers were afraid. He could see it in the way they moved, the way they watched the shadows, the way they flinched at unfamiliar sounds. They were not afraid of human weapons, though those were becoming more dangerous every day. They were afraid of human nature, the speed at which these creatures adapted, the way they turned every defeat into a lesson, the way they looked at Zarathi technology not with fear, but with hunger, like children given a new puzzle to solve. One of his officers told him about an interrogation that had gone wrong. They had captured a human soldier, a woman, average size, nothing remarkable about her. During the interrogation, she had been calm, almost polite. She answered some questions, refused others, and showed no fear whatsoever. After 4 hours, she escaped. She had memorized the rotation patterns of the guards, figured out the security codes by watching which buttons they pressed, and stolen a weapon from an officer who had come too close. On her way out, she took a Zarathi lieutenant as a hostage. She was gone before anyone knew what had happened. The officer who told Vrethkalor this story could not stop his hands from shaking. Vrethkalor sent desperate reports to the Zarathi homeworld. He needed reinforcements. He needed heavier weapons. He needed 100 times more soldiers than he had. The homeworld told him to be patient. The homeworld told him the reinforcement fleet was being assembled. The homeworld told him to maintain control. He wanted to scream at them. You do not understand. You cannot understand until you have been here. Until you have watched these creatures learn your technology in weeks, counter your tactics in days, and look at you with those terrible, calculating eyes that never stop thinking, never stop planning, never stop adapting. Then, on a cold Tuesday morning, every frequency in the Sol system, Zarathi military bands, human civilian channels, and even the old council monitoring frequencies that the humans had supposedly shut down, carried the same transmission. It was a woman's voice, calm, steady, and cold as deep space. This message is for the Zarathi Dominion, and for anyone else who might be listening. My name is Colonel Marin Driscoll, and I speak for the people of Earth. Vrethkalor stood frozen in his command center, listening. You came to our world uninvited. You burned our cities. You killed our people. You thought we would break. You were wrong. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of 8 billion souls. We want you to know, we have finished learning. Class is now in session. At that exact moment, deep in a hidden facility, carved into the mountains of the Andes, engines roared to life. A ship rose from the earth, ugly, massive, covered in welded plates of human steel and stolen Zarathi components. It was crude. It was graceless. It looked like it had been built by people who were angry and in a hurry. It was the most terrifying thing the galaxy had ever produced. The first human-built starship broke through the atmosphere and screamed into the black sky above Earth. Its weapons were hot. Its crew was ready. And behind it, in bunkers and factories and hidden places all around the world, 16 more were being finished. Humanity was done hiding, and the galaxy was about to find out what happened when you gave the most dangerous species in the universe a reason to come looking for you. The Zarathi reinforcement fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system on a quiet Tuesday, and for a brief moment, all 200 warships floated in perfect formation against the endless black. They were the pride of the Zarathi Dominion, sleek, dark vessels bristling with weapons, each one carrying enough firepower to glass a continent. Fleet Commander Torvak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, and looked out at the tiny yellow star in the distance with calm confidence. He had been told there was a minor rebellion on the conquered planet. Primitive species, basic technology, barely worth the fuel it took to get here. He expected to arrive, crush whatever pathetic resistance remained, and be home within a week. The first sign that something was wrong came from the long-range sensors. "Commander," his sensor officer said, her voice uncertain, "I am detecting anomalous objects in the asteroid belt. Thousands of them." Torvak frowned. "Asteroids are not anomalous. These are moving, sir. Under power. They have engine signatures. She paused, rechecking her readings twice. Zarathi engine signatures. Before Torvak could respond, the communications array lit up with a broadband transmission. A human voice filled the bridge, female, calm, and speaking in flawless Zarathi. Attention Zarathi Fleet. This is Fleet Admiral Marin Driscoll of the United Earthship Defiance. You are entering sovereign human space. You have two options: turn around and leave, or come forward and learn why your council told you never to come here. You have 1 hour to decide. Driscoll out. Torvak stared at his communications officer. They speak our language? Apparently, sir. And she called herself Fleet Admiral? They have a fleet? The sensor officer answered that question. I am detecting 17 warships in a defensive formation near the fourth planet. They are, sir. They appear to be constructed from a combination of human and Zarathi materials. Torvak sat down slowly. 17 ships. The humans had been conquered less than 2 years ago. They had been a planet-bound species with no knowledge of galactic technology, and now they had 17 warships. He opened a channel to Vreth Kalor on the surface. The connection was bad. The humans had been disrupting Zarathi communications for months. When Vreth Kalor's face finally appeared on the screen, Torvak barely recognized him. The once proud commander looked like he had not slept in weeks. His eyes were hollow. His voice was thin and rough. Do not engage them, Vreth Kalor said immediately. Torvak, listen to me. I know what your orders are. I know what you think you are facing. You are wrong. Turn the fleet around. Leave this system. Do not. I have 200 warships, Torvak said coldly. They have 17. You do not understand. The numbers do not matter. Nothing works the way it should against them. They do not fight like any species we have ever encountered. They do not follow patterns. They do not behave rationally. Torvak cut the connection. Vreth Kalor had clearly lost his nerve. Understandable, perhaps, for someone who had been trapped on a hostile planet for months. But Torvak was a fleet commander with 2 centuries of experience. He was not afraid of 17 crewed ships, crewed by animals that had been throwing rocks at each other a generation ago. He gave the order to advance. The fleet moved inward through the asteroid belt in standard formation, a wide crescent designed to maximize forward firepower. It was textbook. It had worked in every engagement the Zarathi had ever fought. The first mine detonated against the hull of a destroyer on the fleet's left flank. Then another. Then a dozen more. The asteroids that the sensor officer had flagged were not just moving, they were weapons. The humans had attached Zarathi gravity drives to chunks of rock and metal, loaded them with explosives made from a mix of human and alien chemistry, and scattered them across the entire approach corridor. The minefield was enormous, chaotic, and completely unpredictable. No 2 mines behaved the same way. Some drifted slowly until a ship came close, then accelerated to ramming speed. Some detonated at a distance, spraying shrapnel. Some did not explode at all. Instead, they latched onto hulls and began broadcasting jamming signals that blinded sensors and confused navigation systems. One mine, inexplicably, attached itself to a cruiser and began playing human music at maximum volume on all Zarathi communication frequencies. Torvak lost 11 ships in the minefield before his fleet cleared it. 11 ships, and they had not even seen the enemy yet. Then they saw the enemy. The 17 human ships were waiting in a loose formation near Mars, the fourth planet. They were, frankly, ugly. They looked like they had been welded together in a hurry by people who cared more about function than form. Plates of human steel sat next to panels of Zarathi alloy. Weapons of both species bristled from every surface, bolted on wherever they would fit. The largest ship, the Defiance, had what appeared to be a human nuclear warhead strapped to its nose like a battering ram. They were the most terrifying things Torvok had ever seen. The battle began at 0847 hours, Sol System time, and it was unlike anything in Zarathi military history. The humans did not fight in formation. They did not follow any recognizable tactical doctrine. Each ship seemed to operate independently, making decisions in real time, adapting to the flow of battle with a speed that the Zarathi tactical computers could not predict. One human ship would charge directly at a Zarathi battle group, guns blazing, drawing fire and attention, while two others circled around and hit from behind. Another would play dead, going dark and drifting until a Zarathi ship came close to confirm the kill, and then it would light up every weapon it had at point-blank range. They used weapons the Zarathi had never seen before. Human railguns that fired metal slugs at a fraction of the speed of light. Missiles that split into dozens of smaller missiles, each one targeting a different system on a different ship. Electronic warfare so aggressive that entire Zarathi squadrons lost communication and began firing on each other in the confusion. And when their weapons ran out, they used their ships. The human vessel Jakarta, a converted cargo hauler, armed with mining lasers and stolen Zarathi cannons, took critical damage 3 hours into the battle. Its engines were failing, its weapons were spent, its hull was breaking apart. Any sane crew would have evacuated. Instead, the Jakarta turned toward the nearest Zarathi carrier, accelerated to maximum speed, and rammed it head-on. Both ships were destroyed. The carrier had been the Zarathi fleet's primary fighter platform. Its loss crippled the fleet's ability to launch small attack craft. The crew of the Jakarta had known exactly what they were doing. They had chosen it. Torvak watched from the bridge of the Dominion's wrath as his fleet came apart. He threw every tactic he knew at the humans. He tried encirclement, they broke through. He tried concentrated fire, they scattered and regrouped. He tried retreat and regroup. They followed, faster than he thought possible, and hit him while his ships were turning. 9 hours after the battle began, it was over. The humans had lost 11 of their 17 ships. Over 1,000 human sailors were dead. The Defiance was battered, burned, and barely holding together. The Zarathi had lost everything. All 200 warships, destroyed, disabled, or captured. Every single one. Fleet Admiral Driscoll stood on the bridge of the Defiance, bleeding from a cut on her forehead, and opened a channel to the Zarathi homeworld. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "This is Fleet Admiral Marin Driscoll of the United Earth Fleet. Your reinforcement fleet has been destroyed. You have 48 of your hours to withdraw every soldier from our planet. For every hour after that deadline, we come 1 light-year closer to yours." In the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, 400 species watched the Battle of Mars orbit in real time on long-range sensors. Nobody spoke, nobody moved. The Dol-Makri delegate was quietly weeping. The Krithvan had turned completely still, the way their species did when processing something beyond their ability to comprehend. High Arbiter Selena watched the last Zarathi ship go dark, and simply closed her eyes. "And so it begins," she whispered. The Zarathi did not withdraw in time. At 0600 hours, on the 3rd day after the battle, the Defiance and its 6 surviving sister ships powered up their engines, turned away from Earth, and jumped to faster-than-light speed. Their destination was programmed into every navigation computer, the Zarathi homeworld. Humanity was coming, and for the first time in the history of the galaxy, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The Zarathi homeworld was called Karath, and it was a hard, dry planet of black rock and red dust under a pale orange sun. Its people had evolved to fight, to compete, to dominate, to obey the strong and crush the weak. For 3,000 years, the military caste had ruled Karath with an iron grip. Generals became kings, soldiers became law, and the ordinary Zarathi, the farmers, the workers, the mothers, the children, lived under the boot of a system that told them obedience was honor, and war was the only path to glory. When the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in Karath's orbit, the entire planet braced for annihilation. Every military installation powered its weapons. Every civilian shelter sealed its doors. The Zorathi who had access to communications heard the reports from Sol and knew what was coming. The species that had destroyed 200 warships with 17 crewed vessels was now here, in their sky, with every reason to burn their world to glass. Fleet Admiral Marin Driscoll stood on the bridge of the Defiance and looked down at Kara through the main display. Her ship was battered and scarred. Her crew was exhausted. She had lost friends, colleagues, and nearly 1,000 sailors in the battle at Mars. The people of Earth had lost millions in the initial invasion. Every person on her bridge had a reason to hate the world below them. Every person had a reason to press the button and end it. Driscoll looked at her weapons officer. Then she looked at the planet. "Open a channel," she said. "All frequencies, civilian and military." The channel opened, and Driscoll spoke. "This is Fleet Admiral Marin Driscoll of the United Earth Fleet. We are in orbit above your world. We have the capability to destroy your military infrastructure from here, and we intend to do so. But I want to be clear about something." She paused, and the bridge was silent. "We are not here to destroy you. We are not here to conquer you. We are not here to do to you what was done to us. We know that the invasion of Earth was ordered by your military rulers, not by your people. We know that most of you had no choice, no voice, and no say in what was done in your name." She leaned forward slightly. "We know what it is like to live under the rule of those who use power to crush the powerless. We have fought that battle on our own world, many times, across our entire history. We are still fighting it. And we did not cross the stars to become the thing we have always fought against." The first strikes began 12 minutes later. They were surgical, so precise that the Zorathi military command could not believe what they were seeing. The humans hit weapons factories, military bases, orbital defense platforms, and command centers. They struck with a speed and accuracy that left the surrounding civilian areas completely untouched. A missile would destroy a military bunker, and the school next door would not lose a single window. They did not bomb cities. They did not poison water supplies. They did not target hospitals, farms, power stations, or civilian infrastructure of any kind. Instead, they dropped supplies. Cargo pods fell from the human ships, food, medicine, water purification equipment, and emergency shelters. Each pod carried a message printed in the Zorathi language. "From the people of Earth, we are not your enemy. Your rulers are." The effect was immediate and devastating, not to the Zorathi people, but to the Zorathi military caste. For 3,000 years, the generals had maintained power by telling their people that the galaxy was hostile, that every alien species wanted to destroy them, that only the military could keep them safe. And now, an alien fleet was in orbit, destroying every military target it could find while dropping food and medicine on civilian populations. The lie collapsed overnight. Uprisings began on every continent of Karath. Ordinary Zorathi, workers, teachers, farmers, engineers, took to the streets. They had endured centuries of military rule, and now, emboldened by the proof that the outside galaxy did not have to mean destruction, they simply refused to obey anymore. Garrisons were surrounded. Officers were arrested by their own soldiers. The military government sent orders to fight, and for the first time in Zorathi history, the orders were ignored. Commander Vreth Kalor was captured on Earth 4 days later. The remaining Zorathi occupation forces, cut off from reinforcement and command, surrendered without a fight. Vreth Kalor was brought aboard the Defiance in restraints, expecting execution. What he got instead was a small room, a meal, and a conversation. Driscoll sat across from him, 2 cups of something hot on the table between them. She looked tired. She looked like a woman who had been carrying a very heavy weight for a very long time. "I hated you," she said simply. "When your ships came through our sky, when I saw my city burn, when I buried people I loved, I hated you more than I have ever hated anything. I wanted to hurt you the way you hurt us." Vreth Kalor said nothing. His 4 eyes watched her carefully. "But that is not who we are," she continued. "We have done terrible things in our history. We have committed every sin your species has committed, and 100 more. But we have also learned, slowly and painfully, that vengeance is not justice. Destruction is not strength. The measure of what you are is not what you do when you are weak. It is what you do when you are strong. We know what it is like to be ruled by monsters, Commander. We will not become one to punish you." Vreth Kalor looked at the cup, then at the woman who had destroyed his fleet, liberated his homeworld, and spared his life. He had conquered worlds. He had commanded armies. He had believed, with absolute certainty, that power was the only thing that mattered in the universe. He picked up the cup and drank. 6 weeks later, Fleet Admiral Marin Driscoll stood in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council and faced 400 alien species who looked at her like she was a bomb that might go off at any moment. She had dressed carefully for the occasion. Full military dress, medals she had earned in the war, boots polished to a mirror shine. 2 Marines stood behind her, straight-backed and stone-faced. She was aware that she was the first human most of these species had ever seen in person, and she was determined to make an impression. She did not give a long speech. Humans, she had learned, were at their best when they were direct. "We did not ask to be found," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "We did not ask to be invaded. We did not ask to be watched, studied, catalogued, and filed away under a label that said, 'Do not touch.' We did not ask for any of this." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of species that had watched her world from the shadows for 10,000 years. "But here we are, and I know what you think of us. I have read your file, the one you kept on us for all those millennia. You think we are dangerous. You think we are violent. You think we are a threat to everything you have built." The chamber was absolutely still. "You might be right. We are all of those things. We are capable of terrible destruction and terrible cruelty. We carry that inside us, and we always will. But we are also capable of something else. We are capable of looking at our enemy, at the people who burned our cities and killed our children, and choosing mercy. We are capable of reaching out a hand instead of making a fist." She straightened her shoulders. "We are not asking for your permission to exist. We are here whether you like it or not. But we are asking for something. We are asking for a chance, not to prove that we are harmless. We are not harmless, and we never will be. But to prove that dangerous does not mean evil. That strength can be used to protect, not just to destroy." She let those words settle over the chamber, like dust after a storm. "We protect our own. That is what humans do. And if you will let us, we will protect you too. Not because we have to. Not because we want something in return. Because that is who we choose to be." She stepped back from the platform. The silence lasted for exactly 7 seconds. Then High Arbiter Selena stood. "I move that humanity be granted a permanent seat on the Galactic Council," she said. Her voice was steady, but her golden eyes were bright with something that the delegates had not seen in her for a very long time. The vote was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to change. Slowly, cautiously, species that had hidden from each other for millennia began reaching out to the strange, terrifying, impossible creatures from the little blue planet. Trade agreements were drafted. Cultural exchanges began. And the humans, being humans, immediately started sharing their music, their food, their art, and their terrible, wonderful sense of humor with anyone who would listen. The Zarathi, freed from their military rulers, became the first alien species to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. There was a strange bond between them now, the bond of enemies who had fought, bled, and finally understood each other. Zarathi students enrolled in human universities. Human engineers helped rebuild Zarathi cities. It was not easy, and it was not fast, but it was real. The Do Not Engage file on Sol 3 was updated for the first time in 10,000 years. The old classification was removed. The new one read, Allied. Handle with extreme respect. High Arbiter Selena sat in her private chamber late that night, reading the updated file. Her aide, a young Valori with nervous eyes, stood nearby. High Arbiter, the aide said quietly. Are you worried about them, the humans? Selena looked up from the file. She thought about the species that had chased animals across plains until they died. The species that had strapped themselves to explosions to reach their moon. The species that had been invaded, conquered, and nearly destroyed, and had responded by liberating their enemy. She smiled. It was the first time her aide had ever seen her do so. Worried? She said. No. For the first time in 1,000 years, I believe I am hopeful. She closed the file and looked out the window at the vast, star-filled dark. Somewhere out there, on a small blue world, orbiting a yellow star, 8 billion impossible creatures were looking back. The galaxy had spent 10,000 years afraid of what humanity might become. They had built walls of silence and secrecy to keep the humans contained. They had watched from the shadows, terrified of the day the humans would finally reach the stars. They never considered the possibility that what humanity would become was exactly what the galaxy needed.